All right, welcome to Module 2. Mike Stoll here again. You had a short break from me in Module 1. I didn't have an introductory guided tutorial, which is what this will be for Module 2. I want to stress that this isn't a lecture. I'm just using these introductory pieces that you'll have in all the following modules as just a way to kind of whet your appetite and give you a little bit of an overview of where I think the module will take you, and also kind of my thoughts as well, so you kind of know my mindset going in. Doesn't mean I'm stuck in one position, but this is kind of, I'm just trying to give you some framework for what we're going to be dealing with. Module 1 was all about who entrepreneurs are. You went through and read about entrepreneurs, characteristics, traits, behaviors, what they do, why they do it. In one article, interesting that they kind of view it as almost a mental illness. The departure point for this module is that it's really about entrepreneurs are people who take an idea and turn it into a business. Whether they're actually entrepreneurial or not is another story, but at the heart of it, anybody that starts a business, at least in my book and maybe in others, is at that point an entrepreneur. They're venturing into the unknown, and they're taking some risk, and they're creating something new. It may not be innovative, but at least they're creating something new, and they're trying to make a go of it. And so entrepreneurs are people who take an idea and turn it into a business. And I'm thinking, that the key part of that statement there is that they take an idea and they turn it into a business. And so the critical part of this is, and my own experience has been, the quality of the idea and whether it represents a business opportunity, which we'll go into in a little while, is fundamental to whether the business will be successful or not. Or as one of my colleagues says, if you plant in fertile ground, you're more likely to be successful with your crop. And I think the same kind of applies to entrepreneurs. But it does start with an idea, and the challenge is, do you have any ideas? And I know from my own experience here at Cal State San Bernardino in the 12 years I've been here working with students, it's, I talk to a lot of students and I say, so what kind of business would you like to start? And I get a halting response, which is, I'm not really sure. I'm kind of hoping to find that out in the program. And we can do that with the students, but it is kind of surprising that so many students really don't have an idea for a business, and they're not really sure how to come up with an idea. So this phrase of got ideas resonates with me, because it all starts with the idea. Every business starts, somebody had an idea for something. I'll give you some examples. Garner Holt Productions, based here in San Bernardino. Garner had the idea that he wanted to pursue a path in life that involved making animatronic figures. He had a life-changing moment when his parents took him to Disneyland as a young child, and he said on the drive back, that's what I want to do for a living. I want to make animatronic figures. And as of now, Garner Holt Productions is the world's leading animatronics company. They do work for Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, casinos, attractions, resorts all over the world. So it started with Garner having an idea that I want to create figures and animatronic figures and ride show attractions. That's what I want to do. That's the idea I have for a business. Vantage LED, based in Ontario now, originally Corona. Chris Ma, working in the industry, said, you know what? I could do this better. I've got an idea that I could do this better. And they make large-scale LED advertising modules for schools and companies. Tap Out, the mixed martial arts clothing company. Charles Lewis Jr., who started the company along with a couple of friends, really had this idea that in this emerging sport, mixed martial arts, there was no brand, there was no way to show your allegiance to the sport in any meaningful way. And so his idea was, I'm going to create a line of clothing, t-shirts and the like, that will allow me and my friends to brand our allegiance to this sport and show that we're behind this sport. And Tap Out moved from, Charles, who I actually went to high school with and knew his father very well, building a company from the trunk of his car up into a company that, when unfortunately Charles passed away tragically in a car accident, was doing about 200 million in revenue, and then was subsequently bought by a larger firm. So Tap Out started as an idea. I think I could create a T-shirt clothing company to really highlight a growing sport. 510, Charles Cole, really unique shoes that they make. He was an avid rock climber, and just couldn't. Nobody was making the kind of shoes that he needed, and so his idea was, I could do this. I could make the shoes. I'm not going to wait for anybody else. I'll make the shoes. Really innovative company. And then last but not least, Lucas Oil Products, based in Corona, California. If you're a football fan, you'll recognize Lucas Oil from Lucas Oil Stadium, which is the home of the Indianapolis Colts. Forrest Lucas started Lucas Oil Products out of his trucking company. He had an issue. He had a problem with his maintenance costs for his trucks, and he was trying to find better lubricants and oils that would reduce maintenance cost. And through a lot of trial and error and experimentation, he came up with a formula that worked, and he spun that off into a gigantic company that has products all over the world. I think they've got more than 200 or 300 lubricant-based products, and of course they are involved in motorsports and sponsoring the Indianapolis Colts football stadium, all kinds of things. But it started with an idea that, hey, I maybe I should just create my own lubricant products to help drive my costs down. And then once his colleagues and industry peers heard about it, they jumped on board, and pretty soon he had a full-scale company. So it's a real interesting story. So those are some businesses that just started with an idea, a simple idea. I've got an idea. I could do this better. I could do this differently. Or why isn't somebody doing this? And we could take care of this. Every business starts with an idea. The problem is, for most people, is like, where do business ideas come from? Every business starts as an idea, but what are the sources of business ideas? And so what I thought I would take you through some 9 basic areas where business ideas are often born, or where they emanate from. And we'll go through each in detail, but this is just to kind of give you a sense of where some of these business ideas come from. First is pain points. People have a problem. I alluded to Forrest Lucas having maintenance issues, high cost of maintaining his small trucking fleet. It was a pain point for him. He was losing money, and he wanted to figure out a way to make the life of his trucks longer, to be more efficient. And so pain points are an obvious starting point, whether it's a personal pain point or it's a pain point that you observe with other people or friends and family tell you about. Pain points are one of the most impactful areas where business ideas come from. Second is a passion or a hobby. You may have a passion about something. Tap Out was a good example. Charles was absolutely avid, over the top, passionate about mixed martial arts. He wanted to be a mixed martial arts fighter. He liked going to the fights, and that was kind of it consumed him to the point where Charles quit his job as a sheriff's deputy in San Bernardino County to become the entrepreneur and build Tap Out, because he was so passionate about the sport and what he thought its growth potential was and how he wanted to be involved in it. So passion or hobby area is really, really big. Work experience. I'm going to talk about some examples down the road, but we all work in industries, and we all see, probably, if not daily, at least weekly, we think, oh my gosh, I could do that better, or somebody's missing. There's a market or a customer segment that the existing companies that service this market are missing. Why is nobody doing that? So our work experience often informs us and gives us ideas for new business ventures. Observation can be very powerful if we're paying attention. In fact, I'll tell you a little bit of story about some of the issues around paying attention and really thinking about business ideas and it being a purposeful approach. But years ago, I had a, it's not really observation, maybe I'll save it for later, but observation is simply watching and seeing what's happening around you. If you see somebody experiencing a problem, or you overhear a conversation, people talking, or you see a customer's interaction, could we do that better? Is there an opportunity here? So observation can be a very powerful area. There's a purposeful search. I've got a really nice story. I'll tell you about that. There are instances where people say, I want to start a business. Now I'm going to start searching for an idea. I don't have any ideas. I'm going to start searching for an idea specifically. And I think the example I'll use will really illustrate that point. Recycling. This is not recycling our plastic cans or plastic bottles and cans, but it's really observing and seeing that there are business concepts out there that could be recycled. And when I say recycled, I mean really taken from one really specific context or culture and transported to another entirely different context or culture. So we'll go into that a little bit. I've got a couple of good examples there. Reinvention is how do we take something that exists already and reinvent it to where it's a new business. So we'll talk a little bit about the idea of reinvention. Taking something that exists already, completely transforming it into something new. So you can look around in your environment and say, boy, there's a lot of stuff out there that could be reinvented, or there's a lot of business concepts that could be reinvented. There's an area called technology transfer, tech transfer for short. And really what we're talking about here is there's tons of technologies and really cool science that has not been commercialized and could be commercialized, and I'll give you some examples about how we go about that. But it's a very fertile area for new business ventures. And last but not least, what I call STIR. It's an acronym for what's really long form is societal change, social and demographic change, technological changes, industry changes, and political and regulatory changes. And STIR, social and demographic, T for technology, I for industry, and R for regulatory. We'll kind of go into those in depth. Let's tackle first, though, pain points. You're going to get this from the reading, but there's a couple of really salient examples. The gym bag company, OGO, started out as a pain point. The founder couldn't fit his bag into the gym locker and decided, I'm going to have to come up with a solution to this, and he created a company that's become very successful based on a personal pain point. Flavor X, which you'll read about, is also a great example where parents had an issue with their child taking medicine and the bad taste of the medicine and the critical nature of the medicine, and coming up with a solution to that problem and creating a business from it. Spanx, the men in the class may not be familiar with Spanx. Women may or may not be, but Sarah Blakely, who's now a billionaire, created Spanx to solve a problem which is kind of which we all face eventually. You're kind of trying to firm up our bodies so that we look good in clothing. And Spanx has become just a knockout hit, a really gigantic company based on the fact that it's a common problem. Lots of people have it. Sarah had it. She tried to figure out a solution to it. What was out there wasn't working. She came up with something new, and voila, she's got she has a runaway hit, a well-established company. Clemmy's Ice Cream, actually a local company. When I say local, they're located in the Coachella Valley area of Southern California. And John Gordon founded Clemmy's because he went to the doctor, and the doctor told him, my goodness, you're not doing well. You're going to be a diabetic if you don't change your diet. What the heck are you doing? And John said, well, I eat pretty healthy except for the quart of ice cream I eat every day. He was an ice cream addict. And his doctor said, well, you got to give that up. And John said, I've been eating ice cream since I was a kid. I'm not sure I could do that. So he set about, based on his problem, he said, I can't give up ice cream. I love ice cream too much. I've got to eat it. And he said, well, I'm going to create an ice cream that tastes great and is sugar-free and lactose-free, and people that are in my situation can still have their ice cream and not worry about the consequences within reason. So he created Clemmy's Ice Cream based on his own personal pain point of health issues and wanting to still have ice cream. Passion or hobby. I talked earlier about Garner Holt Productions. Garner was passionate about animatronics and figures and robotics and all that wonderful stuff, and so he created Garner Holt Productions because that was his interest area. He didn't really see himself doing anything but that with his life, So much so that he was able to change some of his high school courses to support that. He got his teachers and his principal to buy into it. He graduated from early from high school so he could start, and move his company forward, which he created when he was 14 years old. Another one, Jensen USA, located in Riverside, California. Mike Cachet started Jensen USA as a teenager. He lived near. He was a biking enthusiast. He loved mountain biking. He wanted to be a mountain bike professional, and he lived near a trailhead, and he saw people going by all the time, and his passion, his hobby, his all-encompassing everything was biking. And he said, all these people are coming by. Maybe I could offer a bike service as they're coming by, tune up their bikes, fix their bikes, provide parts, and that's morphed into, arguably the largest online retailer of bike parts and actual bicycles in the world, with Jensen USA. So a passion or hobby. We all have passions. We all have hobbies. How could we come up with ideas in those areas that could create businesses that would be the best of all worlds? There are some that argue, you don't have to be passionate about a business. And I would agree. You can kind of grow into it. But it's always a great starting point. If you're really excited about something, you'll go to the ends of the earth to do something with it. And you just have to find what that is. Next is work experience. A couple of examples here. Aqueous Technologies in Rancho Cucamonga, California, another local company. Mike Conrad had extensive work experience in the area of companies that made machines that clean printed circuit boards. After printed circuit boards are made, there's a lot of they're not very clean after they've been through the process. And some companies he worked for made cleaning machines for printed circuit boards for the aerospace industry, electronics industry. And by virtue of working in that industry, he saw some of the changes coming in terms of restrictions on chemicals and things like that. And so he ultimately branched off and created his own business that would address those industry changes. He wouldn't have known about that if he didn't have the work experience. And his current employer, or the employer at the time, didn't want to address those changes, didn't think they were necessary, so he broke off and started his own business, which has now really become the industry leader in those machines. Another, an example closer to home for me, Aircom Systems was formerly my family's company. They sold it several years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. After 40 plus years of operating the business, we've sold it. Involved in avionics manufacturing, and this is based on work experience. My father was in the military, was involved in both maintenance of aircraft, primarily helicopters, and also the electronic and communication systems. Once he got out of the military, he went to work for a company in charge of all their maintenance of their mechanical and communication systems for a large helicopter operation. And during that period of time, he saw some what he felt were opportunities to create a new business in focusing on airborne audio. And he doesn't have that business idea doesn't come forth unless he has all that accumulated military and professional experience. And so a company that was an industry leader and still almost 50 years later is still in business, resulted from that work experience. And we all have work experience that we can draw from and say, wow, I'm really good at this. I do well. My current company isn't addressing a market need. I'm going to go do it myself. Happens all the time. Purposeful search. My favorite story here is a company called Media Defender. I met the young men that founded this company probably almost 10 years ago now, not long after they had started the company. And really, these are guys that wanted to start a business and didn't really have an idea for a business, so they went on a purposeful search to try and find something to start. It's a long story. I'll try and give you the abbreviated version, but the two founders of Media Defender met while working at an aerospace company here in Southern California. They found out immediately that they liked each other, but also they immediately found that they weren't sure they wanted to make a career in the aerospace industry. And so they started looking for ideas to start businesses. They started one business. It didn't do so well. They were not engineers. They said, well, what could we do? And so they were looking around. We've got to be on the lookout for business ideas. One day, Octavio was one of the founders was reading the newspaper about the problems with piracy. Hollywood was losing oodles of money because people were pirating their DVDs, and the music industry CDs were being shared online, and they were losing billions of dollars every year. And he thought to himself after reading that article, wow, that's a big problem. And we've been searching for a business idea. Maybe this is it. Maybe we can develop a business that will solve that problem for the music and and film industry, and in the process, build a great company and make a lot of money. So they started Media Defender, and ultimately were able to provide a solution that didn't solve the problem, but did a pretty good job of, making it harder for people to pirate intellectual property. And subsequently, they sold the business for $42 million to a larger firm after just a few years of operating it. And there's a lot of really interesting stories behind that company, but neither one of them had the technology. They didn't understand the technology. They hired some engineers they worked with. They actually invited those engineers that they worked with at the aerospace company to be a part of the founding team and take some equity in the company. The engineers refused, so when Octavio and his partner sold the company a few years later, they were the primary shareholders. They had some other small investors, but those engineers lost out on a tremendous upside. But long story short, they weren't searching for an idea, and they found it by reading the newspaper, and then they took action on it. I think that's the big thing there. Next is recycling. The most obvious example of recycling is Starbucks. How many of us go to Starbucks, if not daily, at least a couple times a week? I'm not a coffee drinker, so I don't really go to Starbucks very often, but it's really an institution, and it's become a worldwide phenomenon. How did it start? Starbucks, at its origins, was not the Starbucks we know today, and it really morphed into the Starbucks we know today because Howard Schultz took a trip to Italy. And while there, he noticed the coffee bar and the coffee culture, and he thought, maybe we could have that in the U.S. Maybe we could transport that concept into the U.S. So he essentially recycled somebody else's concept. He took it from one spot and recycled it and moved it to another, changed it a little bit to meet the taste of the consumers in the culture he was targeting. And Starbucks is a huge success story, whether you like them or not. And that's simply, it wasn't an original idea. He just took it and transported it and made it work in another culture. So Starbucks is a great example of a recycled concept. Black Entertainment Television, the founder of Black Entertainment Television was actually sharing a cab with a gentleman who was talking about a television network that he wanted to start for senior citizens, and the BET founder said, well, my goodness, I'm African American. There's a lot of African Americans. Maybe we could recycle the specialty television network into something that targets African Americans, and thus Black Entertainment Television was born. A few years ago, I had students from China. The logo won't appear up on the screen, but a few years ago, students from China that said, we want to recycle the American Girl doll concept, and if my daughter grew up collecting those, we want to recycle that into China. We don't have anything like that, and we think that would be very successful if we recycled the concept and tweaked it and made it appealing to our culture. It would be very, very successful. So I thought that was a unique twist on recycling. They really bought into the concept and did their business plan around that. Reinvention. How do we reinvent something? You're going to see a video in this module about a company that's all they do is they reinvent products. It's a company called IDEO. We're going to get to them in a minute. But GoPro, what a great success story. And if you're not familiar with GoPro, that's the camera that allows you to take pictures while you're surfing and hiking and flying and doing all those wonderful things. Just hit, type in GoPro on YouTube and you'll see thousands of videos that are capturing people's adventures from dogs skateboarding to people, parasailing and those kind of things. So, but that really started, and you're going to view a video of this. But GoPro is nothing more than a camera that's been kind of repurposed for the ability to capture images while in motion and doing these extreme sports. And it's became a billion-dollar company simply by reinventing the camera and how it's used. IDEO, which I mentioned earlier, company that's just dedicated to taking products in particular and reinventing them, redesigning them, or finding new ways to appeal to new markets. So when you see the IDEO video, you'll see what I'm talking about. Tech transfer, which I mentioned earlier, is really the concept is the federal laboratories. Every federal agency, or most federal agencies, including the military, have laboratories where they're scheming up and dreaming up and coming up with new technologies and new science that helps them in their mission. So if it's the military, they're developing new weapons and new ways of deploying troops and all kinds of wonderful, interesting things. You got those federal laboratories. Most research universities have really interesting technologies that are being developed in their labs by the professors and the research associates. And the reality is most of what's invented in these labs never sees the light of day, never gets commercialized, never gets transferred out of the lab. So one very fertile area for people that either don't have a technological foundation or just think I want to do something that's based on intellectual property is to find these emerging technologies and license them out of the labs. Tech transfer, basically transferring these technologies out of the lab and commercializing them to where they can they can derive revenue. A couple of good examples locally, well, at least one's very local, is a technology that came out of University of California, Riverside. That basically it's technology around mosquitoes' ability to sense humans, and really the fundamental crux is how can we fight things like malaria, which is so Olfactory Labs was a company that was born by licensing the technology out of University of California, Riverside, and one of their products, the kite patch, as you'll see on the screen, one of the things that they're proud of is that Bill Gates has noted their existence in terms of a way to fight against malaria. So it's a really emerging company that I think is going to do great things in the long run because they're really leveraging this cool technology that was developed by a professor at University of California, Riverside, and most professors and most researchers don't start businesses. What they do is they develop really cool stuff. They don't know how to commercialize it. So there's really a lot of fertile opportunities to go in these labs and commercialize what's been developed. The American Biohealth Hearing Pill, which I'm not sure what the status is on this, but I worked on this project years ago. It's a technology that was developed by the military and was licensed and further developed by a company called American Biohealth. The technology actually came out of the naval laboratories. And the original technology was how can we diminish or guard or prevent hearing loss in the military, particularly those, the Navy and the Army. They've got people that are around those big artillery guns, and my son was a sergeant in the Army and was in charge of an artillery unit, and they all have hearing loss, and so it's a huge problem for the military. So American Biohealth was thinking, well, it's a huge problem for the military, but what about industry? What about manufacturing, where you're around these very deafening machines and the long-term exposure and the cost that involves for businesses and employees? So they set about trying to develop this technology with a commercial application so that people would be preventing and alleviating hearing loss. Final category, STIR, social and demographic changes, technological changes, industry changes, regulatory and political changes. I'll use a couple of examples. I won't go through all of them, just to give you a flavor for it. One of my favorite examples of social and demographic changes is McDonald's. McDonald's came around at the time when society was undergoing changes. It was post-war. People had more discretionary income. Women were in the workforce, particularly because most women were working during the war, helping build the planes and bullets and tanks that fueled the World War II effort. So you had a lot of social trends, a lot of demographic trends. People wanted to eat quicker, and thus McDonald's was born right here in San Bernardino, California, the original McDonald's. Southwest Airlines, really has become the entity it is now because of the deregulation of the airline industry, which has allowed them to really take their model and scale it up pretty significantly. And there's a lot of industries that have benefited from regulatory and political changes. Here in California, solar has become gigantic. If you look around in Southern California now, I grew up at a time when we had smog alerts and really poor air quality. It still is not the best, but it's dramatically better than it was when I was in my teens, and that's fueled a lot of industry development and a lot of revenue for companies that make products that help with air quality. So regulatory changes really fuel business ideas and business opportunities. The challenge is, coming up with a good business idea, and as you go through the idea exercises in this module, the likelihood is you're going to experience what I experience and what most students experience is that a lot of our stuff sucks, and it takes multiple iterations, and it goes back to the old adage, and I think it might have been Linus Pauling that said this: the best way to come up with a good idea is to have lots of ideas. Usually our first ideas aren't any good, and that's why it's best to take the approach that I'm going to ideate, I'm going to brainstorm, I'm going to come up with a lot of ideas, and I'm going to refine and go back through and come up with more ideas and make it a multi-stage process, because the reality is it's rare that the first ideas that we come up with are any good, and even the ones that appear promising still need to be developed. And so I'm big on the best way is to come up with a lot of ideas. Some more thoughts about this ideation process. It's multifaceted, because I'll ask students to sit down and ideate, do these idea exercises. And most of us don't just sit down and do that. It's not a habit. It's not something we do. It can become a habit, but there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle of coming up with ideas. And I think part of it is finding your spot. I tell people all the time, I'm the most productive in ideating and coming up with ideas when I get away from the office. When I'm somewhere else, and it doesn't matter whether it's work related. In fact, oftentimes it is work related. I'm at a conference or I'm at a meeting and I'm away from the office and I feel free and nobody's bothering me. And if I'm at a conference session where it's not that great, suddenly the ideas are flowing, and I filled up a couple of pages on things I could do here at the university or build our program or business ideas. And a lot of it's finding your spot. For some people, that's walking around the block. Taking a long walk allows them to open up their mind. Whatever it is, I encourage people to find that spot, that moment, that peace of mind that allows you to open up and really be creative, because I really believe that everybody has creativity in them. They just have to find it and they have to tap into it. I think it helps to be curious. I think it helps to want to know why things tick, or want to be curious about what's going on in the world. A big part of ideation is coming up with innovative approaches, and I think thinking about being innovative. Peter Drucker, the management guru, and the writings he did about, the late Peter Drucker, the writings he did about entrepreneurship, he said entrepreneurship is really all about innovation. If it's not innovative, it's really not entrepreneurship. And so innovation, is a part of the ideation process. How can we do things better, differently, more uniquely? I think attentiveness is a part of it too. I have an idea for a business that comes from, I think, a personal pain point, but I've heard people talk about it too. It kind of tuned me into it, made me think about my own experience, and it's sort of, and I say attentive means sort of paying attention to what other people say. We're often not in the moment and not paying attention to things, and we don't see a lot of what's happening around us. It's this attentional blindness is a tough thing to overcome because we get on autopilot, we get in the groove, and we miss things. It's just why they did a study a few years ago, and they had a clown riding a unicycle riding down the side of the road, and they tested this concept against people that were talking on the cell phone, and an exorbitant percentage of those people that were driving while talking on the cell phone did not see the unicycle riding clown go right by them. They don't see it because they're not paying attention. They're focused in. They're on autopilot, and that's how it is with us in daily life. We get focused on what we're doing, and we don't see the obvious things happening around us. So that attentiveness, listening, watching, observing, paying attention to what's happening around us, I think is a big part of ideation. Ideation is hard work too. You're gonna have to really sit down and sweat. It's like working out. If you're gonna dedicate time to ideation, it's hard work. And I have a lot of students come back and say, "Oh God, that was just awful. I really struggled coming up with ideas." And I said, "Yeah, it is hard. It's like not working out for years, and then you go back and work out, and you got muscles you didn't even know you had, and it's painful." So, but in the long run, once you get doing them, I've had students come back to me later and say, "Oh my gosh, this is awful. I'm thinking about ideas all the time. I can't stop. You've created a monster." So hopefully that happens with you, and where it becomes a habit. But I think being attentive, focusing on innovation, being curious, being creative, finding your spot, really working hard at it and trying to create it as a habit really, really helps. And also, don't be judgmental. We judge our ideas as soon as they come out of our mouth, as soon as they come out onto the paper. I'm guilty of it. We judge them. We start thinking, how's it going to work? We start trying to operationalize them. Don't do that. When you're ideating, holy crap, just put them down on paper. Come up with 100 ideas. You'll look back later and you go, holy, what was I thinking? That was really stupid. But when you generate wild ideas, that's the starting point. You'll find from the idea story, they want wild ideas. That's the starting point for building really cool ideas. So think about wild ideas. Don't constrain yourself. Get out of the social constrainment that we've had, growing up. Society molds us and forms us to do things a certain way. Drop all that. Find your spot. Let it go. Be creative and have fun with the idea exercises. And, like I said, it's going to be hard work, but I think I've never had a student that came back and said, after it's all said and done, that they didn't enjoy the idea exercises that they did and they didn't find it beneficial. So get out of your comfort zone, and if you're already a creative person, you're just going to take it to a whole nother level. So probably enough about the idea exercises that are coming up. Now I want to switch gears. I want to talk a little bit about, we're talking about innovation. I want to talk about blue ocean strategy. You're going to read about blue ocean strategy, and this is a really cool concept that I've been dealing with for years. And the whole idea is that how do we create uncontested market space and make the competition irrelevant? I mean, that is blue ocean strategy. And blue ocean as opposed to red ocean. You're going to read about all this, but I just kind of want to give you a teaser. Really blue ocean strategy is how do we create and capture new demand, make competition irrelevant. It's uncontested market space. We've got a gigantic head start, and we basically unlock the problem that companies have had for years of how can you be different and low cost. In the red ocean strategy, companies are just trying to beat the competition. They're competing against each other. They're trying to just exploit whatever existing demand is out there, and any incremental improvements in demand is out there. And they're usually having to choose between, low cost and differentiation. And the nice thing about the blue ocean strategy is, as you'll see as we get into it, it's really, really a new way or a different way of thinking. Not new anymore, but a different way of thinking. And the most commonly used examples in the blue ocean area are Cirque du Soleil and Nintendo and their Wii. Cirque du Soleil, the adult circus, as I joke with students all the time, how many of us, when we become adults, how many of us go to the circus? Unless we have kids, we don't usually. 9 times out of 10, we're not going to go to the circus unless we have kids, and we're going to take them to the circus. So Cirque du Soleil kind of reinvented the circus industry by creating the adult circus. We're not going to go into that, but you can read about that. Nintendo Wii, I think, is the more interesting example. And really, at its heart, what did Nintendo do? And the heart of the Blue Ocean strategy is they took something that largely appealed to young males. I mean, when we think about the sweet spot of video games, historically, it's been young males. And you'll see these pictures up on the screen. The Nintendo Wii primarily appealed to a lot of people, but it primarily appealed to young women, seniors, and families. Not the typical Call of Duty, war game, Madden, NFL, sports, that kind of, not the typical audience for that. So those are people that in the past would have been considered, non-users, for lack of a better word. The other thing that Nintendo did is they positioned themselves. They were different. They're different on a number of levels. Relative to PS2, PS3, and the Xbox 360, Nintendo Wii is markedly different. Now, the gap's closing, things are changing, but I'm looking back to when Nintendo Wii came out in the early 2000s. And at the heart of it, they pursued the differentiation and low cost. It's a completely different because it's a unique gaming experience. It's a motion-based gaming. They appealed to those non-gamers, the young women, the seniors, and the families that never would have sat down and played a video game. My wife doesn't play video games. My daughter didn't really play video games. But as soon as Wii came out, they're playing the Wii. They're doing the Wii. I went to visit my nieces over the holidays right after the Wii came out. They had the Wii. The entire 10 days we were there, it was nonstop Wii. These young women, these young girls, had never even thought about playing video games, not even on their radar. But suddenly it's huge. Non-gamers. That's creating new market space. Those people didn't buy video games before. They created a whole new market. They appeal to non-gamers. And nobody was competing for them. PS2, Xbox, they weren't going, PS3, they weren't going after these people. That's a whole new market with no competition. And they further made it even better because they reduced the cost by eliminating features that those people in that market they were going after, or those markets, didn't care about the high-end graphics. They didn't care whether it was a certain processor. They didn't care about speed. They cared about the experience. I mean, Nintendo Wii hit it out of the park because they created a whole new market space, no competition, gave them a huge head start. I mean, years of a head start before the other gaming platforms started to catch up. So, and they still made money. The terrible secret is that those gaming platforms most of the time weren't making money on the hardware. And Nintendo Wii comes out and offers a platform that's cheaper, and they're making money on it. And they're making money on the peripherals. It's a win-win. So when you look at Nintendo Wii, holy crap, they applied it, and Nintendo views themselves as a blue ocean company. They hit it out of the park with this. At its very core, they really unlocked the differentiation low-cost issue. They created new market space. They really, they kind of expanded the video game market to new users, and they were different by a, really unique motion gaming system. Low cost. They didn't have to invest in the the high-end hardware, so they were able to sell it at a reasonable price and make a profit. So no competition. A growing demand from non-users who are now getting attracted, and the ability to lots of money, crazy good. So just kind of really going back to the core of the Blue Ocean approach. I assigned an article on value innovation. When you read it, this will make sense if you've already read it. But I'll just give you a little teaser. The reality is the core of the Blue Ocean approach is asking 4 fundamental questions. It's not quite that simple, but I boil it down to this. It's called RICE. I like brown rice. That's my favorite rice. Maybe you like basmati rice. Maybe you like white rice. Maybe you like Spanish rice. I don't know what rice you like, but the rice here for Blue Ocean is really simple. It's an acronym for reduce, increase, create, eliminate. And we'll take a quick look and apply a couple of these to Nintendo Wii. And so reduce is which of the factors that the industry takes for granted should be reduced well below the industry standard. A company that wants to do Blue Ocean needs to ask that question. What is it that everybody takes for granted that could be reduced below the industry standard because the end users, the customers, the consumers, they don't care if we reduce it. Not going to affect them. What can we increase? What can we raise above the industry standard that's going to add value and people are going to go, wow, that's awesome? What can we create that the industry's never offered? Nobody's doing it. And what can we get rid of that when we get rid of it, the consumer's not even going to bat an eye? It was never a value add to begin with, and we all assumed it was important, and until we really talked to the customers and found out, they didn't care. So, what did Nintendo create? Well, they offered motion gaming. Nobody else was doing it, and it appealed to people. It appealed to particular people. They basically created a new way of interacting with video games. What did they reduce? Well, they reduced the graphics. They reduced the processing power. They reduced the cost of the platform. If you look at Cirque du Soleil, what did Cirque du Soleil eliminate? If you're familiar with their model, the adult circus, what's the fundamental component of a circus for children? It's the animals. What did Cirque du Soleil eliminate? The most costly factor involved in the circus and the one that didn't add any value for the adult market, animals. So this reduce, increase, create, eliminate questions, they're at the heart of thinking about business ideas from a Blue Ocean perspective. And so as you're ideating, maybe you think about these things. But it's that RICE approach. Just a kind of note, shifting gears a little bit, we talked about pain points, problems as being a fertile ground for businesses. And many would argue that business focused on solving problems probably have the greatest potential to be successful, because people don't often buy something just because they want it. They buy it because they need it. The problem with focusing on problems is making sure we're defining the problem and understanding its scale. That's critical. Defining a problem and its scale is critical. If we don't do that, we don't really understand the scope of the problem and whether it really is a problem. And I've got a problem-solving exercise in this module that hopefully will help us with that. Let's take a look at, thinking about this, defining the problem. One, you got to ask, who has the problem? Two, how much of a problem is it for them? Is it a really huge problem? And really the question is it a headache or a migraine? I'm fortunate. I don't get headaches. I don't have migraines. I can't think of a time in my life when I've had a headache. So I'm really, really fortunate. But my wife has headaches and she has migraines. And when she has a headache, it's a simple fix. And it doesn't really bother her, so she can either get past it, or if there's an aspirin or something nearby, she'll take it. But it's not that big of a deal. But if it's a migraine, oh my goodness, and I know people that have migraines really extreme, and this is a holy crap problem. It's an awful problem, and if any of you experience it, you probably know what I'm alluding to. So how much of a problem is it? Is it a migraine where, if we can solve it, oh, I'm sorry, I just got distracted. The In-N-Out burger truck just drove by my office. I'm looking out the window, and it's driving by, and for me, it's only a couple of hours to lunch. Sorry for the diversion there. Hopefully it isn't lunchtime near where you are. Sorry, back on track. Is it a headache or a migraine? If it's a headache, most of the time people aren't going to pay to solve it because it's not that big of a deal. But if it's a migraine, anybody that's got a migraine, they'll tell you they'll do whatever they can to solve it. And when you think about business problems from that perspective, I think it's important to try and categorize it, because if it's a migraine, people are going to really, really pay for it. You also have to look at who has the most benefit from a solution to the problem. That's not always clear. We can define a problem, and you're going to get this in the problem-solving exercise. Traffic in the Los Angeles metropolitan area, or insert metropolitan area here that has traffic problems. Who has the traffic problem, and who has the most to benefit from a solution? It's not so obvious. And then ultimately, who can pay for a solution? You'll see in the video. I won't give away the end result, but you'll see in the video about the baby incubator that there is a solution to low birth weight. Babies born with low birth weight. Who has the problem, and who can pay for a solution, and how did industry tackle that problem previously, and why is there a solution now where there wasn't before? And a lot of it boils down to who's going to benefit from the solution and who can pay for it. And ultimately, who can pay for it, and will they actually pay for it? No business starts unless somebody has a problem or a need that's so bad they are willing to cough up the dollars to solve it. They've got to be willing to pay for a solution. So once you go through generating ideas, and if you're generating ideas based on problems, you really have to be clear about the problem itself. Who has the problem? How much of a problem is it? How do we categorize it? Is it a headache or a migraine? Who's going to benefit from a solution? Can they pay for the solution? Will they pay for the solution? All questions you have to ask after going through the idea process when it relates to problem-based ideas. No matter what area you come up with ideas from, personal pain point or problem, hobby, work experience, you're going to come up with all these ideas. And as I said before, going through the process, you shouldn't be judging the ideas. When we're being creative, we shouldn't judge our ideas. Don't judge your work. But eventually, you're going to have to figure out, is my idea any good? Meaning, does it represent a sustainable business opportunity? I have a colleague that says, the reason why most businesses fail is because they should have never been started in the first place. They were an idea that didn't represent an opportunity for a sustainable business. Didn't have to be a scalable business. Could be a lifestyle business. Could be a high growth scalable business. Doesn't matter. Business ideas have to represent an opportunity. So how do you know if your business idea is any good? I use what I call the 5 conditions. They're really straightforward. I think, hopefully easy to remember. But I think, in the years I've worked in business and run businesses and worked with startups, how do you know if your business idea is any good? Number one, primary condition above all else. There must be a customer who needs what you're going to provide and is willing to pay for it. Customer, customer, customer. You've got to get out, and one of the things we're going to work on in a subsequent module is looking at startup models and how you find out whether there's a customer. Because if there's no customer, there's no business. Number 1, customer. Number 2, there's a market. There is a reachable, attractive market, which means it's attractive from the standpoint of there's a large group of customers, and preferably they're growing. There's more of them every day. Customers are important, and hopefully there's a lot of them that make up a reachable and attractive market. When I say reachable, something you can get to. They're easy to get to. They're easy to market to. They're easy to get the product in their hands or the service delivered to them, whatever it may be. 3, the business has a business model that can support the company. Now, business models we're going to go over in a subsequent module, but essentially business model is how do you make money? What are the fundamental ways that you make money? Does it have a business model that can support the company? So we'll go into more depth later on that. This is just an introduction of the 5 conditions. Number 4, the timing is right. Its timing is right from both a market perspective and a personal perspective. You have to be ready to do this. It has to be the right time for you personally to pursue this idea. If there's a customer and there's a reachable growing market and you've got a business model figured out that can support the company, is the timing right? Is the market window of opportunity opening or is it closing? And is the personal window of opportunity for you right? And last but not least, of the 5 conditions, do you have the expertise and are you mentally ready for the challenge? Because starting a business is not for the faint of heart. It's been romanticized in our culture now, but it's an incredibly taxing venture. You got to be mentally ready for the challenge. You have to be committed to it. Your family, your support group has to be committed to it, and you have to have the expertise. And when we say expertise, you have to be ready. You have to have the expertise and know what it takes to start a business. And hopefully that's also the industry expertise, And if you don't have that industry expertise, do you know how to leverage it? Do you know how to get it? Do you know how to build a team that has that? The story earlier about Media Defender was the two startup founders, they didn't have the expertise on how to solve the problem of stopping piracy. So they hired it. They brought it on board and they learned it and they became experts in the industry. So you either have the expertise or you get access to it and you learn it, and you're also mentally ready for the challenge. How do you know if your business idea is any good? The 5 conditions are the starting point. The 5 conditions don't happen by themselves. It takes somebody who's not a fortune teller. You can't just peer into the future and say, I know all these 5 conditions are right. Entrepreneurs at their heart are not fortune tellers. Can't predict the future. So, it takes detective work. In order to make informed decisions, to understand those 5 conditions, to know whether your business idea is an opportunity, you have to do some detective work, which we're going to talk even more about in subsequent modules. But the heart of it is here. There's a lot of folks that say, hey, look, I don't need it. This is a sure thing. I know it in my gut. I'm going to do it. And that's great. Good luck. If you're successful, that's wonderful. You've overcome gigantic odds. The reality is you do need to do some detective work because nothing's a sure thing. So one way of doing the detective work is to do a feasibility study, some form of a feasibility study. You do some research. You do some research online, face-to-face, whatever it is. You write a business plan. That's been a tried and true method. That's been kind of the standard. We've moved away from business plans as being the first step, the go-to thing on the detective work, and making it really kind of the last thing you would think about doing. And really for me, the idea is that you're going to employ one of several startup modules, which we're going to discuss in module 3. But the detective work really means you got to, if you're going to do detective work, if you buy into that and you buy into a startup model that has detective work as a part of its fundamental assumptions, you're going to have to go out and talk to customers. You're going to have to talk to suppliers. You're going to have to look at the supply chain. You're going to have to look at the economics of it. You're going to have to look at costs. You're going to have to look at timing. There's a ton of things you're going to have to do to determine whether those 5 conditions are favorable for you starting a sustainable business opportunity. So the detective work, really, really important, which we're going to get around to. But at this stage, it's all about the idea, man. Don't get past the ideas. Don't jumpstart. Don't start judging your idea. Is this going to be good? No. At the idea stage, let's just understand innovation. Let's understand how to think differently. Let's think about creativity. Let's think about ideating, coming up with business ideas. And again, the business ideas in this that you're doing, they can be for. Doesn't have to be for your own business. It could be it could be something within the company you already work for. Like you think there's opportunities for the business that they're missing. I worked with one nonprofit organization executive every year. He has his top people. They have to submit ideas for new business opportunities for their company. They are what he calls intrapreneurs. They are entrepreneurs working within his company, and they are required to come up with ideas for that business. So the ideas you come up with can be on your own. They can be for your existing employer. They could be social entrepreneurial related. So, how can we solve social problems, using entrepreneurial approaches? The sky's the limit. You pick your path, or you could do a combination of all those. It's up to you, however you want to approach it. But ideate, ideate, ideate. And understand where ideas come from, where that fertile ground is, and how we then have to eventually start evaluating our ideas, because ideas are just inert. As I often say to our students, ideas are out of our mind. They are part of our mind, but some of the best ideas are based on our environment and interactions and social things, and so they are not just in your mind, they are out of your mind, but they're very, very powerful. And do not judge your ideas at this stage. I can't say that enough times. Let me use an example. I was flying back from Mexico on a vacation a number of years ago. Sitting next to me, I struck up a conversation with the gentleman next to me. I found out that he was a retired airline pilot, and he found out what I did, and he said, Mike, I've got a great story to tell you. He said, it's a good story, but you'll see why it's kind of a little bit of a painful story for me. He said, years ago, I was flying. I was beginning to get back problems. I was lugging around my suitcase, my flight case, and I had to figure out a way to make it, because I didn't want to stop flying. So he was a tinkerer. He tinkered in his garage. He came up with a solution for his flight case and his... this was in the 70s, by the way. He came up with a solution. He put wheels, big wheels, like big skateboard wheels, on his suitcase and his flight bag. And he used that. And he said, I thought it was great for me, but he goes, I just didn't think beyond the idea. I didn't think it was that great, really. I didn't think it was that innovative. It was just great for me, helping me. He goes, and I didn't think anybody would want that. Fast forward now, there's nothing that doesn't have wheels on it that's related to travel. All of our suitcases and bags and all that have big wheels. And he's looking at it thinking, I could kick myself because I didn't think it was that great of an idea. It was just a simple fix for something I was having a problem with, and I never looked for the bigger potential. So, don't judge your ideas, and also be open to the potential of where they could go. So that's probably enough about ideas. I've kept you on the line, or the computer long enough. Let's talk about the next steps for this module. Hopefully you're watching this first. If you're watching this last, it's anticlimactic. Get warmed up by the videos. I love the videos. I think they're fun. Complete the readings. Dive into the idea generation exercises. Have fun with those. It is hard work. I'm curious to see whether some of us, we operate certain ways. So some people are very good with structure, others don't like structure, so how you deal with the idea generation exercises will be interesting. Participate in the discussion forums, including the problem solving exercise. I'll be in there. And then optional in this module is post, after you've gone through the ideation process and you've looked back on it, if you want, I'd be interested to see, post the idea, or maybe even a couple of ideas that you're most excited about, that after you look back on the ideation process you go, wow, I'm really captivated by this. This seems really cool. So it's not required. You don't have to post your ideas, but if you have one or two that you think you're really excited about, post them, and then let's see what happens with that, because a lot of times when we bring ideas out in class, people start to build on the ideas. And they start to morph. And that's a cool thing, because I've rarely seen a business idea that didn't need to morph, didn't need to change, didn't need to evolve, didn't need to become a little bit different to represent a business opportunity. So if you want to capture the power of the group, and you'll see that in the IDEO video, they talk about building on the ideas of others. Feel free to post your idea. I'll chime in, others chime in. And not to tell you your idea is bad, but I would say if people want to discuss the ideas that are posted, provide constructive feedback or affirmation of what you think about the idea. So I think that's enough for Module 2 introduction. I hope you enjoy the module. Again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to track me down. Call me, email me. As I said before, I don't have set office hours because you guys aren't working on a set schedule based on what I've read of your introductions. Everybody's going at a different pace. You're all super busy. So I'm just trying to make myself available for whenever you need me. So take advantage of that. All right, I'll see you in the discussion forums, and then I will revisit with you the introduction to Module 3. So talk to you soon.